So, hello, Lara, and hi, Yerevan. We are today on our 8th, I think, critical bodies in conversation. We started this conversation with the pandemic, and we actually decided to take advantage of this situation of all of us being at home to open to the world. And we are trying to create a platform of talking to each other and sharing about our experiences that we are transforming, we are making social work through the body, and how these experiences are happening in different parts of the world. So we had guests last week from France with an NGO which was working with refugees and sports. The week before, I think, we were talking about bicycle and how social distancing is going to change our approach to transportation. And we had another guest from Iraqi Kurdistan with an NGO working with refugee women and bicycle and making social projects through that means. So today we are with Lara Aharonian. First of all, I want to start by saying that I feel very excited and happy to be with Lara today, because I had the great pleasure and honor to work on her sites during 6 months when I was in Yerevan, thanks to the Hunting Foundation Exchange Fellowship scheme. And I had actually the opportunity through her voice and through her work and through her approach to actually discover myself and discover a new world and understand the power of some things, some actions that I was also able to do. And she really inspired me after that during all my work. And this is, I think, for me, you are the inspiration. And this is why today this our organization BoMoVu exists and is still alive today. So yeah, I want to first welcome you, and just to, before we start talking, just to remind everybody about ground rules. So this conversation is broadcasted live on the Facebook, and there is also some people who are joining us on the Zoom meeting. So if someone has their question on the chat, and Yerevan or myself will be asking the question to Lara, or they can just open their cameras and start talking and ask directly their question to Lara. And we also check on the Facebook page in case during the video sometimes also people can ask questions from the Facebook. So you can also interact with lots of the comments there and bring them to the Zoom meeting room here. So yeah, welcome again, Lara. Do you want to present yourself first before we start with our questions?
Thank you, Neil. Thank you so much for saying all these nice words. And we miss you also a lot in Armenia. We often talk about your experience and the new things you taught us as well, how to use our bodies and the spaces around. So first of all, I want to send you a big hello to all the team from Women's Resource Center, to you. So I work specifically in Yerevan in Armenia. I'm one of the founders of Women's Resource Center, which is a grassroots feminist organization. We started in 2003, and over the years we developed and we grew together with different collective of women, with a larger collective of women of different ages, different backgrounds. And one of the main issues we started tackling was violence against women specifically. including domestic violence and sexual violence. They were very taboo topics in Armenia. And another topic that was really very sensitive was women's sexuality, sexual rights, and reproductive justice. And just reclaiming our places and spaces as women with our bodies, with our voices as well, was quite a challenge in quite a transitional post-Soviet republic. Many things have changed from then. We had recently the Velvet Revolution 2 years ago. Of course, it was an important period for not just Armenia, but also for the region of South Caucasus, and changing a lot of dynamics regarding the neighbors around, including peace building, conflict resolution, transformation, etc. So I am still in Armenia trying to overcome this last challenge, which is the pandemic. As you probably have heard, it's becoming worse and worse in Armenia with the numbers. And we're trying to resist this, not to resist, but to overcome as much as possible by working together, by keeping our spirit up, and continue working from home as much as possible, and trying to find ways to continue our activism despite the challenging times.
Great. Yes, I can say that the Velvet Revolution is also, I think, an example for the whole world on a non-violent revolution, which is quite rare, and it's a great, I mean, I think many of us were following with great excitement. Mm. So, Yerevan, what do you think? Shall we start with our questions?
Yes, sure. Do you want to go first about the walks organized?
Yeah. So, Lara, I was in Armenia. I didn't have the chance to witness it myself, but I remember you were talking a lot about the Women March that you were organizing. And so, yeah, can you just tell us about what is this Women
March? Yeah. Actually, when we had our, in Armenia, it was rare that women will go out on the street to protest in the beginning, end of 90s and beginning early 2000. And I remember very well when we held our first protest, which was on November 25th, around, I think it was 2005. We were maybe 4 or 6 women at most marching outside, and everyone was looking at us in a very strange way, because it was not very much they were not used to see women walking alone and demanding, talking about their rights and raising sensitive issues. Of course, there were other kind of protests, more related to the political sphere, where mostly men were present, and women will be there, but not in large numbers, and less young women will be present during those protests in the 90s, when Armenia was gaining independence. So in 2005, we started with very few, and then we decided to repeat that at least every year. And gradually our numbers started to grow. So more women started to join us, and also men started to join us. And most of our protest was about raising the issue of violence against women, and specifically domestic violence, and women's rights in general. And then after a while, we said, okay, everything is being very much concentrated in the capital. And we also, whenever we talk about the realities that women are facing in a town, in the capital city. And because Women's Resource Center used to have a lot of volunteers from the regions of Armenia, from the provinces. They would come as students in Yerevan, and in their spare time they will also volunteer at the center. And during our discussions, they will bring a lot of the other realities that they were facing in their regions, which is provincial towns, in rural areas, villages, where women have completely different kind of experiences. So while talking about these issues, a couple of us started saying, why don't we go there? Why don't we go and see what's happening, and maybe, you know, support and hold a solidarity march, also just go and talk to other women. And because most of the time, the interaction was happening online or on TV or radio, things like that, the physical interactions were becoming rare, and it was difficult to have the voices heard of women who were living and working in rural areas, because most of them were not connected on internet. They were not active on social media. So for us, the idea started around 2010, 11. And then at the beginning, it was more like an idealist thing, saying, yeah, we can do this, we can start marching from here. And everybody was bringing their own ideas of this very way of doing this. And gradually we talked, and then at the end of 2011, we said, let's do this, and let's see who's going to join us. And we just wrote to different people, announced it first by email to people who were supporting us. And we said, we want to walk for a couple of days. And we decided to start with the Shirak region up in the north, because we had a few volunteers from there who were raising the issues around that, because it's also a very migrant province. Seasonal migrants used to go most of the time, mostly migrant men working abroad in Russia and then coming back a couple of months during the years. And there was a lot of economic issues, a lot of issues related to violence and around that issue. So we decided, okay, let's start from there, because we also have a host group that could also join us from there, because we didn't want to go from the city and just say, you know, we're here from the city and bringing our own views. We wanted really to do it together with other women who were originally from that region. So gradually we started, and then we tried to form a budget, because we didn't have any money for this, and then we couldn't find money, of course, for this. And then we said, okay, we just use whatever we have, and then we will find people who will host us during the walk. We can stay at people's houses, we can stay in churches, or in schools, taking our sleeping bags and staying there. So for this first march, we had approximately 15 women who joined us. Some of them were from staff members, others were from the specific region. Then we had also a couple of diasporan women who decided also to come and join us. They were volunteering in Armenia at that time. And we decided on the dates, and then we just went there. Of course, a couple of us went there before to just make sure where we can stay and arrange it with local people to host us. And I think the first march was approximately 10 to 12 days approximately, and we visited more than 30 villages, I think, around 30 villages. I'm not quite sure, but I can send you links as well to see where we have a page specifically on that. We also visited a couple of towns, provincial towns in that region that were important, and we had schools there that we could visit. So we went there, and the first day was really difficult, because we were starting to walk from the point was to go to Gyumri, which was the center of this northern province, and start walking around the villages there, stay in different villages if possible, and then gradually work towards Yerevan. So first village we entered, everybody was looking at us. Who are these women coming from where? Usually, you know, in Armenia, in the villages, you don't see a lot of women outside. Most women are occupied in the houses, doing housework or working on the land. And when you go in the center of the villages, it's mostly men gathered, you know, either playing cards or, you know, smoking together and just sitting, doing nothing sometimes, while the women are working and doing all the care work that is needed for people to survive. So they were looking at us and like, who are they? And they felt threatened at the beginning and they started following us. But we just went there with talking, different people gathered in different places, and we told them who we are, what we are doing. Then we said we're going to visit different houses, drink coffee with people, with women mostly, and ask them how they are, how is the situation in their area. Just a simple, you know, approach of asking about the well-being of, you know, people or women specifically living there. Of course, we took with us a lot of information. We had flyers with hotlines. We had small flyers with the description of different issues on women's health, on violence against women, on just reproductive health information, and different things that we thought that women could be useful for women. And also to establish a contact, to tell women as well that, you know, if you're experiencing a crisis situation, here are the hotlines and here are the organizations that can help you. Because for organization like us with little resources, we cannot, you know, hire a big marketing company to tell the world about our hotlines. And so sometimes we have to use our own bodies to provide the information and make it accessible to others. So the first day was quite hectic at the beginning because most of us were also not used to do this in Armenia. So what we did is we, 2 by 2, we separated in the middle of the village, and we went door to door, and we just knocked on the door. And, you know, in Armenia is still this hospitality where you go in a village, you know, everybody wants to offer you food and coffee, and it's like a big party. So we took advantage of this approach and just, we went to people's houses, we drank maybe 20 coffee per day so, and sat with women and mostly girls, because at first the man will come and check who we are, and then when we tell them, you know, we're going to talk about women's issues, so automatically they disappear, and we stay alone with women. And when you drink coffee, then it's enough to create this safe space around you, and all kind of conversations already starts around these rituals. So we just talked about life in general. We talked about their life, what they do, their daily work, what kind of hardship they experience as women living in the villages. They will take us to their land, show us how they're doing it. And then they will ask us questions about this, that, and, you know, medical questions sometimes just about, you know, sometimes also when we talk about violence, for example, we describe in a manner that, you know, these are the issues that we are facing in Yerevan. And sometimes they realize and they will say, oh, you know, there's my neighbor who's experiencing this. And sometimes the sad part is that sometimes they will say, oh, I'm living that, but I didn't know that, you know, that is violence. I thought, you know, how men are in general and how in a family it should be like that. Of course, we listened to a lot of stories, and we tried to record all these stories. We tried to keep it through a blog that we were also using during those days. So different participants who were coming at night, they will record or write about their memories of the day and what kind of issues they've heard. And sometimes, you know, there are sayings or things that will stay with you, that, you know, that touches you emotionally as well, because we've heard stories of violence, we heard stories of abuse, we heard stories of economic hardship and conflicts, and sometimes just, you know, families who were, you know, dismantled and health issues as well that women felt, ashamed to talk about. But since we were a little bit out of their community, it was easier for them to talk to us. So this was the main objective, is to break the silence, to create this solidarity, go from door to door and create these links and friendships with other women. But also we took this opportunity to visit as well local institutions. For example, the local community clinic, because, if you want to know a lot about women, you need to go and talk, not to the doctors, but to the nurses. So we went to talk to the nurses to see what kind of issues women were coming with, what kind of issues, because it's migrant communities mostly. There's also the issue of HIV spreading, and that was a real issue in Armenia, with a migrant husband coming back, bringing, all kind of sexual transmitted infections. And then because of this taboo issue, they will not get tested a lot of time, and it could spread with their wives and families. So nurses will tell you a lot about the situation of women's rights. So we were also talking separately with nurses. And then we would go to local mayor's office to see if they are aware of women's rights, gender equality in general, what kind of programs they have. And then at the end of the day, we will conclude it with a collective event for the community. Usually we held it at a school, village school or town school, and then we would invite parents, teachers, and talk to them about again, women's rights, sexual violence, domestic violence. We also distribute a lot of information, and we also hear their questions. They would have a lot of questions, and they, people in the regions a lot of time are more honest about issues, and they will tell you very quickly what is wrong in the community. So that was the experience, which was quite emotional for us as well, because it also changes a lot of things inside us, every one of us, because we also stayed in people's homes and we saw how people are living and what kind of different issues they are, and sometimes their issues are not heard in the capital, are not heard by ministries or policymakers. And our role was more to do this bridge between these two realities in a way. So this was how it started. And from there, every 2 years, we continued organizing. And now, last year, in 2018, we did the last one, because this year we are not able to do it because of the pandemic. So until today, we visited 4 regions with all their villages and towns. And hopefully we will continue after the pandemic, if still possible.
Thank you so much, Lara, for this rich explanation. Actually, you answered my question, the question that I'm about to ask partially, but I would like to clarify. You mentioned solidarity when you were talking about the beginning, but I was wondering if there was any examples of inspirations that you took nationwide or internationally, and that you looked up to and you got inspiration from.
Women in history are known to do a lot of marches. Of course, we were studying most of it and then following what's happening with the global International Women's March. We were also present in different, traveling in different areas also, and experimenting how March 8 marches were happening in different part of the world. I can't say there's one specific inspiration, but I think mostly it came from the fact that this first march that we held in 2005, where we were really very much afraid to go even on the streets, because we were like feeling out of our place, helped us also to overcome this fear. And we were just 5 or 6, and then these 5 or 6 stayed, and with all the marches, and continue doing so. So it was not one specific things, but we also, shared, because of this global, access to internet and seeing what's happening in Latin America and, around the world. A lot of time also in Turkey, Istanbul, we've been present to many marches in Istanbul, one of the strongest one from the feminist movement, which was very inspiring as well. So these all add up and gave us more courage to say that, we're not alone doing this. And a lot of women were doing this for ages and quite successfully.
Thank you.
I think, Yerevan, you had an example from Palestine, or you were talking about?
Yes, I did field work in Palestine, and I witnessed a ride. They called it the Freedom Ride. Freedom Bus. They used the bus to travel all around the West Bank, and they gathered people from the villages, and they took stories by using the forum theater technique, the theater of the oppressed. But initially they were inspired by the African-American movement in the 60s and 70s, the Freedom Riders. So they drew a connection there. So I was wondering if there was a small connection or intersectionality, but what you explained is already similar to that, I think.
Actually, it's interesting because the last, the third march we did afterwards, because of the collecting the stories, a group of our volunteers also held a performance in a theater and telling these stories that these women told them. And it was quite successful to raise some issues through this storytelling, which quite similar. We're doing very similar things around the world on these issues.
Yes, it's very interesting. And also reenacting the stories, maybe the traumatic experiences also could empower the people who experienced it. And I find it really empowering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in what you're telling us, I hear a lot of generosity. I mean, the idea that okay, like there is no funding, but let's just go and do it. I mean, what you're explaining us is a huge organization. I mean, you need to speak beforehand, try to understand where you're going to sleep, how you're going to approach the people, and going to municipality, going to teachers, nurses, all this. I mean, this is a huge work, and I see a lot of generosity, but also at the same time a lot of simplicity in the way it's done. It's just about going, knocking a door and saying hello, and then like the things happen after that. And you're talking a lot about the stories, the rituals, and the friendship that you build, which I think it's really at the core. Like it's beyond many more like technical explanations on empowerment and this and that. This is just the core of what happens, I think. And so I wanted to ask you, what was your impression when, as a woman's body walking there, what is the emotion that you create in those rural areas? What do you think people are feeling when they see you?
Well, at the beginning you feel very awkward, because as if you're entering a space that you were never meant to be, because people are looking first of all at you. You shouldn't be there. When you are alone, you feel even more threatened, because you don't. It's a new space, and also that people don't accept as much the idea that okay, you're in the middle of the street asking questions and occupying this space that is very public, which is not your place as a woman. But it helped us a lot as a group to walk. It's very empowering when there's a group of women walking. Of course, they're looking at you, but you gain the strength of, okay, you're not alone, and you're stronger together. And then you also meeting another woman from that village who is very much, welcoming you in her house. And that also, it adds up to to being stronger. So at first it's the threatening, you feel threatened, you feel that you're not safe in the beginning, not because of a physical, maybe, you know, somebody not, and no one will attack you physically, but just the gaze and the way, you know, people will make you understand that, you know, you shouldn't be there. And also we are a very diverse group. We had women with different colors, we had different forms, different looks. So of course they see us in the middle of a village. We're not you know, like very regular group adjusting to the. So, but the first one is difficult, and it's mostly happening inside you. And then after the second, the third village, the fourth village, the fifth village, you already, as if, you know, your body is growing, you know, and it's not, it's feeling less threatened in a way, because you're already overcome this internal feeling of, because you also were taught that you shouldn't be in this public space, and you have to overcome that inside you and own it again, you know, that no, I am here and I'm staying here and I feel comfortable in this space. And this takes time. Not everybody could do it. We had women who wanted to come, but they said, no, I don't feel comfortable yet to join you in this. I really support you. Some of them even were donating money, because the second, third year, we wanted also donations if possible, because we didn't want to ask for a foundation. We wanted really people to donate as well, other women to help us do this march. So there are a lot of women who would not feel comfortable. And sometimes women living in that village, what was for me very empowering when I saw young women who decided to follow us, go out, which was the first time, a lot of time to do that. And they joined us and they spent the whole day with us, you know, going again and showing us the way, telling us, oh, go to this house because there are real problems. There's a new bride in that house and she's experiencing problems. Maybe I could show you where you can go. So some people started joining us, and then these friendships continue. We still have, you know, connections with some of the women we visited, and this is how, you know, you spread, you enlarge your space more and more in a way.
I love this metaphor you used of the body is growing. This is perfect. We have a question from Nora. I don't know if Nora, maybe you want to open your microphone and your camera and just ask it. Is it possible technically right now? If Chetin can help us, maybe. Okay.
Video won't come on.
We hear you.
Can you hear me though?
Yes, we can hear you, but we don't see you.
Oh, that's okay. I have a lot of questions, but to start, I guess, and I'm feeling that it's very powerful and inspiring, and to move your body with a purpose is amazing, and to have other people join. So I guess my first question is whether the conversations you had with women along the way changed your perceptions in any way, and whether these conversations affected the way you provide services now.
Thank you for the question. Actually, it changed more us than changed people who we were visiting, because as you mentioned, we understood a lot of things that were not clearer to us. As women activists living in the capital city, it's very different, the issues you're faced with, even though there are some similarities. But when you talk with women outside the capital and the regions and rural areas, you feel that there are a lot of things that you're missing. And that helped us to change a lot of the things we were doing, the services we provided, the narratives we used, and also advocacy work we were doing with different ministries. Before, we used to concentrate a lot of the situation of, for example, reproductive health of women living in capital cities. And after these marches, we started including and changing our narrative, saying that, you know, a woman in a rural area, if she needs abortion, she cannot wait for 3 days. Or if she needs to go, because there's a law in Armenia where if you going to have an abortion, you need to come and then wait another 3 days and then come back. And we told people that if you're a woman living in a village and you need to get an abortion, already it's very difficult for you to have transportation. It's very difficult, very costly. So if you got a transportation to come and visit the capital or the town center where the hospital is to get an abortion, you cannot afford maybe another trip to come and visit it. So a lot of things change in the way we were developing things. And also priorities changed, because we started understanding that, you know, a lot of women living outside of Yerevan, also priorities are very different, like economic issues they were facing. Because most of the time and most of this region we visited, it's, as I said, migrant villages where the men of the villages and the provinces, they are absent 10 months a year. And during that time, most of the work is done by women. They will come back maybe 1 or 2 months a year to stay at home and then go back to work to their job in Russia or elsewhere. So these realities also helped us to reframe the different issues we were raising. Very much helpful in that way.
Thank you, Lara. My next question is also related to this. I was going to ask you about the feedbacks, actually. So the feedbacks that you received from women or villagers in general, did it change the way that you organize the events? Because you started in 2011 and the last one you did was in 2018, right? So in total, how many walks is that? Around 4. So I was wondering what kind of changes did you add up to along the way, along the timeline, based on
we are asking so much that we are just planning to start tomorrow and do what you did. We are just taking all the tips right now.
Actually, yeah, the first March, we didn't know, it's more experimental. We didn't know how many places to visit, do we visit only homes or not. But based on the first March, for example, we added eventually, you know, the mayor's office, because a lot of women, they were raising questions which were very much related with the community budget, let's say, allocations for, you know, community clinic and things like that. So the next ones, we decided to also absolutely visit the mayor's office and ask these questions that usually women ask us, and that should be asked to the mayor's office, for example, how they're allocating their budget to different services. For example, in one region, there were a lot of women asking about local kindergartens because they were not being able to work and there was not enough money to pay the local kindergarten. So these helped us to also change a little bit what we were visiting and why. And by the last March, we put more effort as well to visit a lot of schools as possible, because we understood that if you want to really change things more profoundly, you need to talk to teachers a lot, because they do a lot. And sometimes they even have the role of mediators in families during conflicts. And teachers and nurses, they know everything that is happening in a community. They know who's beating his wife, who's divorcing, who's having an affair, who's having economic issues. So for us, it was important to do that. And then by the 2nd and 3rd March, the nurses and the clinics also asked us if we can do trainings for them, not just this walk. So after the 2nd March, we also designed training workshops. So what happened is that our event became not only a one-time event, but while we were preparing for the next March, we were also allocating time during the year to have several workshops for teachers, nurses, doctors on gender issues, reproductive rights, and other issues. So it developed gradually based on the needs that we were hearing.
Actually, you talked about a lot of the issues that are gender related in Armenia, but I think it's important that we hear and understand, because there are differences obviously from Turkey or from other places in the world. So you talked about this migration fact, the fact that men are away for a long time and then sometimes come back with a disease, and those are things that are not talked about. But I also remember when I was in Armenia that you were working a lot on the abortion of girls, baby girls. So maybe can you explain us about that situation too?
Well, Armenia as the region is known also to have a high rate of sex boy preference, selective abortion as well. So that's also a consequence of gender inequality and how women are understood and accepted in a society. So we don't specifically work on this thing, but we try to tackle the reasons behind it, which is tackling gender stereotypes, prejudices, misogyny, sexism in society. Once we tackle this, which is more educational issue, and also awareness, society's awareness, and raising awareness on patriarchal values that are still very much present in society, gradually this could disappear, because just specifically tackling the issue, it's not enough. It will not resolve the issue. But another interesting thing that we found out while visiting these migrant communities is that we thought, oh, okay, if men were absent most of the time, it must be that there's less violence maybe, and we were really wrong, because there was another form of violence. One form was the violence was, and the pressure and the power was continued by the in-laws, because while the man was not there, the in-laws were the ones who were controlling women's bodies and everything, the work they do, they shouldn't leave the house and all this. And another form of violence that was really for us very shocking was this controlling behavior that continued from abroad through social media. For example, we had these women who were telling us, in the morning I wake up, my husband is not here for a couple of months, but I need to dress up before going out to do my grocery, but open my Skype and show him what I'm wearing. And if he's okay with it, then I can go out. And twice a day, I should check with him on Skype to see if, everything is good. And if I miss something, I could be exposed to violence and physical violence. So this kind of controlling behavior, which is very present in Armenian society and other patriarchal society as a form of violence, kept being present very much, even if it was kind of absurd a little bit. It's like violence of men while men were absent physically, which was something that we learned while walking there.
That's very interesting.
Sorry, I have a question related to that as well, if you don't mind. So a friend of mine sent me a documentary a couple of months ago. He thought that it was Turkish, and I opened it and I realized that it was Armenian. And it was about a young woman getting married, and after the first night, she had to prove her virginity to the mother of the groom. But she couldn't. And then they took her to the hospital, and the doctor was examining her, and he was saying, well, there's no problem. But of course, the mother of the groom wasn't believing in the doctor. And to me, it's such a similar story about Turkey as well. And when we were talking about these things, it reminded me of that. So I was wondering, because now we see a reproducing of the power dominance between two women, actually, because the mother of the groom actually was exposed to the same oppression from maybe her own husband's mother when she got married. But then she's reproducing that when her son is getting married to the young woman. So I was wondering if the walks that you organize in the villages, when these women come together, did you realize any patterns or realizations of these women and saying, wow, okay, then I did this to her, or what I did was wrong, or any kind of empathy or something like that? I was wondering.
Actually, we witness a lot of these kind of attitudes, and I think given the patriarchal values we live in, it's a normal consequences if you look through the patriarchal lenses, because what patriarchy teach us is from a young age that we need to keep this power, masculine power, and all of us should do that, man or women. We need to make sure that the system is successful and continuing. So it's normal that we have women also who are protecting these values and these oppressive values, even though it's against them in a way, but they are taught and pressured to do it. So when the husband or their son, which is representing the power, is absent, they take the role of, keeping the power of their son, even if he's absent, and controlling the wife or the bride. And we see this not only in regions, but also in the capital. It's a very common thing, this mother-in-law and bride power relationship, which is just another face of patriarchal society, where you need to keep absolutely this power. So that's why when we go to the houses, we are of course very much aware of these as well, and we are 2-3 people in the same house, and a lot of time we see younger women who are mostly the brides of the house will be set apart, or going to the kitchen doing the coffee. So there's always one of us who would go and help out and talk separately, while, for example, because sometimes I'm the older one in the group, I will talk with the mother-in-law, and in general try to find ways of understanding what is happening. But once you enter the house, it's very obvious the dynamic that is happening there, especially when there's these 2 generations together. And when you go meet the women, especially the younger women, usually we meet them while they're working in the land or they're doing the shopping outside. It's much easier for them to open up and talk about issues. And a lot of time they will talk about these issues in a very direct way. So it is a reality. It's very complicated. It's not, you have to deal with all aspects of this patriarchal violence that is present, and sometimes the perpetrator is not a man but other women, which it's another face of these, but it's coming from the same sources.
Yes, thank you.
So talking about the patriarchal violence, and I think there's other source too, which is the institution, and which is also raising about the names of streets. Can you hear me well? Or I feel like there's a problem now. Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I can't hear you.
Thanks. Oh, okay. Well, I'm continuing to speak, and if you can hear me, just raise your thumb. Or yes. Okay, cool. So yeah, I wanted to speak about institutional violence, talking about patriarchy, and because I remember you were also working. You are also working on the fact that women are not visible also in the institutions. That there is many statues. Armenia in general is a place where there are many statues, where there's huge stones that are scarred, but there is no woman in those statues. There is no representation of women. And yourself, you wrote a book on Zabelesayan, and there are many other Armenian intellectuals, women who played a huge role in the building of the country, but don't get they don't get the recognition that they deserve. And if you want to talk about this, please go on. But I just wanted to link that to also the legacy that the Armenian people have, and especially Armenia today, and the Armenian women, linking it, there is a legacy of this genocide on today's gender issues in the Armenian society.
Whoa, tough question. Yes, many issues around that. Of course, we have this legacy of violence and genocide, which was transmitted to us from our grandparents, mainly grandmothers, stories of rape that we don't talk about because it's shameful, and stories of, you know, other you can't find a family, Armenian family, who doesn't have stories of the genocide, especially when the grandparents are still alive. So for a long time, we've been, you know, a nation that is in survival. And when you have these reality, this legacy, and also the continuous denial in general, denial politics overall, you still have this attitude of defense, of, you know, survival, and always proving to others that you're the good nation, you're the one who was a victim, and you need to and you see this attitude in all spheres. For example, I remember when I was a younger child, and I was going to school in Lebanon, and I remember that I had this teacher who was not even an Armenian and Lebanese, and I did not do very good in my test. And the first thing he said, it was like, you know, but as an Armenian, you should do better, you know. And that it strikes me right now that this was the attitude from our parents, from grandparents, from community, to show the world that we are the good ones. You shouldn't, you know, massacre us like we have been. And this is the sad reality, that we have to live with this burden that we inherited from our ancestors. And it continues to affect us because of this denial attitude. So, and it affects all kinds of things. It affects how we relate to each other, as in a gender perspective. We need to be, you know, do everything to make sure that the nation is continuing. We need to have children to survive, and to maybe also in the place of all these people who were massacred, we need to have more population to be able to, you know, counter the loss that we faced historically. And also to show that there's nothing bad in our community. We need to show that everything is perfect, and this leads to a lot of issues, because then it becomes very difficult to talk inside the communities about domestic violence, about sexual violence, about all kind of oppression, because then this nation will start to silence you, because now is not the time. There are other things that the nation needs to fight, and your needs are secondary. So for us as feminists, Armenian feminists, we need to also work with these obstacles that are very internal, apart from this global, you know, patriarchal issues that we are facing, but also these obstacles. And because of the legacy also, we had, for example, before the genocide, we have these writers who started talking about feminism, and most of them from Istanbul, Constantinople at that time, talking about like Serpuhi Dusap, born there and worked there, who is considered one of the first Armenian feminists, Zabel Yesayan, Asadur, and all of them. And there was this movement happening, which was cut in the middle because of the genocide as well. And then the whole population went backwards in a survival So it affects us. Now we're trying to reconnect with this past, of course, because a lot of things are being lost as well. So a lot of people don't have access to the writings. So we need to dig in the archives, find all those things that were got lost. So that's why I did a movie about Zabel Yesayan, and I try to promote it as much as possible, as well as self-mobilized, because we need, as this new generation of Armenian feminists, to reconnect with our past, which we didn't have access to. So of course it creates a lot of added issues, but also we need to remind the nation and the government and the community that our rights also are important, and we cannot always concentrate on the collective rights only, on the collective, well-being just, but the collective well-being comes also with the well-being of each and every members of the society. And when women are facing these kind of issues and oppression inside, then the community at large cannot be in a good state or overcoming all these in general.
It feels like if you're talking about gender-related issues, you're going to maybe scratch some place that people don't want because it's going to hurt more. And so that's wherever there is a pain, there is the taboo, of course, and this becomes a kind of this becomes something that you cannot touch because it's because of the suffering, I guess. So that's why you need to make all this communication works also to also say that, or prove to the people that those don't conflict with each other. It doesn't, it's not because you're working or talking about gender-related issues that you are going to be denying the genocide, or you are going to work against the society as a whole. That actually it's the opposite. And so yeah, it's a huge courageous and great work, I think, that you're doing there as a whole. And Yerevan, I think the floor is yours.
Yes, I have another question, but when you were speaking about early feminists in Turkey, Armenian feminists, I also thought about Madame Anahit. I don't know if you heard of her. She was born in Istanbul, and she used to be very active in the 20s and 30s, especially in the İstiklal Avenue and Çiçek Passage. She was a well-known Armenian woman who was full of joy. And now there's a venue called Anahit Sahne, still operating in Istanbul, and it's a hub for feminists and LGBTQ community. And her legacy still lives. And she was a very inspiring woman, I think.
Very
small anecdote.
Never heard about her. I should know more. How can I have more information about her?
I can send you some information for sure after we speak. So my question is about a little bit of contemporary times. You mentioned Velvet Revolution in the beginning of the talk. And before we spoke, I also thought about it because, as Neil said, I also followed the revolution in a big interest, because for me it was very inspiring and intriguing. So I was wondering, because many people think about the Velvet Revolution as a successful revolution, but of course many people also criticize it, even though you see very visible changes in the administration, in Armenian politics and all that. But I was wondering, from your perspective as a feminist collective, how do you read the recent events happening in Armenia, and how did you relate to it, basically?
Well, first of all, as a person and as a feminist, I was very much involved in the street actions, as many of my friends and other feminists as well. And I want to also remind people that Velvet Revolution was successful because it followed a series of other protests that were organized over the years, other movements that maybe didn't get as much attention, but we had several movements happening on environmental issues, on green spaces in Armenia, where a lot of women, and mostly young women, were very much on the front lines. Couple of years ago, we had this fight for a local park, which is called Mashtots Park, which big corporation wanted to, and the government wanted to destroy it to make way to new boutiques and cafes. And a group of young people started, mobilizing themselves, and mostly they were young women. And on March 8th, they really occupied this park and staying in their premises, not allowing any kind of construction happening. Of course, now the park stayed after many difficult, and it's still there. And after that, there were other movements coming, like Electric Yerevan, based on social issues, transportation issues, and gradually these movements have built up. And in most of these movements, women were on the streets. The difference that happened with the Velvet Revolution, that they were not only on the streets this time, and not only young women, because you could see a lot of older women, grandmothers were on the streets most of the time with their grandchildren, which was really interesting to see, closing streets and making sure that their grandchildren are safe, and not letting police take them away, because and in this society it's very difficult to not listen to grandmothers as a power. But also, for the first time, women took the stand. They started talking on taking the microphones and holding speeches. And we saw several women activists from the movement, different movements, like Maria, she's now a member of parliament, like Lena, she's now vice speaker of parliament. This was, the added thing to the previous movement. So in the previous movement, women were taking the space with their physical space, maybe talking less on the microphone, but eventually these brought the space and really the platform for women not only to gather, but also take the stage and also hold speeches. So during the Velvet Revolution, we had this famous speech by Maria because we were gathering at night rallies every night after the day of disobedience. And she also, in her speech, she talked to her sisters, women and feminists who were also closing the streets and in mobilizing people around. And what was interesting that because it was a decentralized revolution, we had a group of feminists as well doing our own actions. So, and we had our own slogans, while the collective slogan was, we don't want, for example, Serge, who is the previous regime holder, we don't want, for example, fathers, let's say, I'm trying to translate, bosses like Serge. They were chanting that all the time. But what we added as feminists, we said, not only we don't want Serge, but we don't want any kind of fathers on us, we decide of our own fate. And this was the first time that we heard a lot of what we were asking on the political sphere, on political speeches, where even the prime minister and then the vice speaker of parliament started also retransmitting our messages, saying that women played an important role and gender equality is an issue, women's involvement is an issue. Of course, we didn't have the ideal reality afterwards, but we surely experienced a very important change. And we see now that in the discourses on a political level, there are quite changes happening. There's still a lot of work to do, of course. A feminist revolution is still yet to come in Armenia, but I think it's on the right track in that way.
Thank you. Neil, do you have any more questions? Can you hear me?
Thank you so much, Lara. I think we've tired. Is my voice coming? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, better.
Okay. Yes, I was saying that we have tired you a lot right now. It's been over an hour that we are holding you. So just maybe very shortly, if anyone has any question, somebody can just open their microphone or video and start asking them. I have to say big thank you. And I think you are doing a great job. And it's just, you know, it's wonderful to just listen to you. I think I would have loved to, I could continue to listen to you for hours and hours and ask many other questions and hear all those stories and all those things, because it's really amazing and really so much inspiring. So thank you so much. Do you have closing words?
Thank you as well.
Before we turn off the Facebook Live.
I couldn't understand the last part.
I think she was asking if you have any closing words.
Yerevan, do you want to?
The closing words, I would say that it's very good that you are creating these kind of platforms where we can talk to each other and learn from each other as well, and continue discussing. And also the importance of continuing the work we do. I'm not the only one doing this, and I'm not alone. And just to remind people that, and other women, that it's not easy, that we face a lot of difficulties. We face hate, we get a lot of hate speech, threats, but that means that some things are changing. And I think the more we talk to each other transnationally and internationally, we can, each of us, have more resilience developed, a collective resilience that could help us continue. And thank you for inviting me for this.
Thank you so much, Lara, for your time. It was such an inspiring talk. And I will be in a close
thanks to you
in the future.
Thank you.
Yes.